Hello, I'm Gordon Lang, editor of CameraLabs.com. I'd like to give you a brief video tour around the Nikkor DX 55-200mm VR lens. Here it is, the 55-200mm. It's an entry-level telephoto zoom lens that's designed for use on Nikkor DX format digital SLRs like the Nikkor D80, which is what I've got it mounted on here. Now this lens is designed to complement an existing general purpose kit lens. For example, if you have the 18-55mm kit lens, this one takes over where the other one stops, effectively extending your coverage to an equivalent of 300mm, and that's pretty respectable telephoto performance. It'll allow you to get really close to your subject. Now this lens features vibration reduction facilities. That's what the VR stands for in its title. And what that means is that it actually has a special optical element built into the lens barrel that adjusts as you're taking the picture to compensate for camera shake. And because it's built into the lens barrel itself, you'll see the effect through the optical viewfinder. And that can be very reassuring to suddenly see your view become very steady when you're taking the picture, because not only does it mean you can handhold exposures much slower than normal with this lens, but it also allows you to frame your shots a lot more accurately. Whereas on systems where the stabilisation is built into the body, the view can sometimes get quite shaky at high magnifications when you're actually looking through the viewfinder. This lens is also an AFS model, which in Nikon terminology means it's got an SWM focusing motor. What that means is that the focusing on this is very quick and quiet. It's built into the lens, and I'll show you how that works right now. If I hold the lens right up to the camera here, and I'm going to press the shutter release button halfway, that is in fact the sound of the lens focusing from one extreme to the other, and you'll see that it was very quick and very quiet. Certainly a lot quicker and quieter than a lot of rival entry-level telephoto zooms, which can be quite audible and slow when you do that. You also notice that the end element didn't rotate there, which is very useful if you're using polarizing filters. And even better news, Nikon actually includes a lens hood and a pouch with this lens. And it's an entry-level model, so Canon, if you're watching this video, please sort it out for your lenses. But I keep mentioning that this is an entry-level model, so how is it entry-level? Well, in terms of build quality, it's certainly not as good as Nikon's top-of-the-range lenses. It's roughly equivalent in build quality to, say, the 18-55mm or the 18-135mm kit lenses. Now that doesn't make it bad in any way, it just means that it's not up to the same standard as Nikon's top-of-the-range models. But if I zoom the lens in here, you'll see that the lens barrel doesn't extend very far. This is a very compact lens. And as I begin to zoom out, you'll see that there's no concerns for creep here where the lens barrel will retract or extend under its own weight. And that's because there's not a lot of weight to this lens. It's incredibly light. You certainly won't complain having this lens attached to your body. It's much lighter than a lot of other telephoto zoom lenses. But anyway, that's enough of the description. Let's see what this lens can actually do for you in practice. To illustrate the coverage of this lens in practice, we're going to start by showing you a picture taken with the 18-55mm kit lens, zoomed all the way out to 18mm, and you can see here that it's capturing a nice wide-angle view of this landscape. Now we'll switch to the 55-200 at 55mm. Now this is taking over where the 18-55mm kit lens stops. Finally, a picture taken with the 55-200 at 200mm, and you can see just how close it's getting to the subject. So with these two lenses you can go all the way from here at 18mm all the way to here at 200mm, and that's quite a coverage to have at your disposal with just two lenses, especially two light and affordable lenses. So what would you use that kind of coverage for in practice? Well, the temptation of course is to zoom it all the way in, and at which point it's really good for portraits. You can really throw the background out of focus, as you can see on this picture here. This was taken at quite close range with the aperture all the way open. This lens is also great if you're taking pictures of wildlife. This photo of a bird was taken under pretty much the same conditions as the last picture, zoomed all the way in, and again with the aperture wide open. But it's not just about wildlife and portraits, you can do other things with this lens as well. Zoomed out to 55mm, it can act as a day-to-day walk-around lens, but you can also get some reasonable close-up pictures with it as well. This picture of some flowers was taken with the lens, again zoomed all the way into 200mm and at the lens's closest focusing distance. Now this was still just over 1 metre away, so we weren't that close to the flowers, but that in turn can be really handy if you can't actually get that close to the subject. Maybe it is about 1 metre away, or maybe if, say, there's bees on those flowers, you don't actually want to get that close to it. So all in all, it's a pretty flexible range to have at your disposal, especially when used in conjunction with a general purpose kit lens. The Nikkor DX 55 to 200mm VR is one of the best value Nikkor lenses on the market today. It's very small, it's extremely light, the range perfectly complements kit lenses like the 18 to 55. The VR facilities really do effectively combat camera shake, and the SWM focusing is very quick and very quiet. So all in all, it's a pretty classy lens, especially considering it's an entry-level model. But you do have to remind yourself that it is an entry-level model, and as such you shouldn't expect miracles from it in terms of optical and build quality. When you've got this lens zoomed all the way into 200mm and you have a very close look in the very extreme corners, you'll notice that the results can sometimes be slightly soft and there'll be a little bit of coloured fringing. However, in practice that might not actually be that big an issue, because when you do have this lens zoomed all the way in, chances are you might be doing a portrait shot, doing some sports photography, or perhaps taking pictures of some wildlife. And typically in those situations the subject will be towards the centre of the frame where this lens is perfectly sharp, and surrounding the subject is a nice blurry background that effectively hides any optical weaknesses of this lens, so you might not even notice the weaknesses of it in practice. In terms of build quality, this lens may not be up to Nikkor's top models, but there's certainly nothing wrong with it, and if you find the kit lenses, particularly the 18 to 55 and 18 to 135 acceptable, then you'll be perfectly happy with this. If however you have the 18 to 70mm lens and you're after something to match its build quality and perfectly complement its range, then perhaps you should be looking at the 70 to 300mm lens instead. But if you do have the 18 to 55mm, then this lens is the perfect complement for it. Together they offer you a decent optical range that will take you from wide angle to decent telephoto, and that will give you an enormous amount of flexibility in practice. To see some more example shots with this lens, along with full results comparing it against the 70 to 300, the 18 to 135mm kit lens and Nikkor's Super Zoom, the 18 to 200mm, then head on over to www.cameralabs.com. There you'll find our full review.